The Road to Resilience, expanded version. Every morning at exactly 5 a.m., Ethan Carter's alarm rang. For most people, mornings were a struggle, but for Ethan, the ritual had become an anchor in his new life. He had a habit now. He had a goal. The sound of the alarm wasn't just the start of another day. It was a reminder that he had promised himself he would push through the pain, the exhaustion, the doubt. A reminder that he was rebuilding something he thought he had lost, his belief in himself. It hadn't always been like this. A few years ago, Ethan was stuck in a monotonous cycle. He had worked in corporate sales for a tech company. Nothing particularly exciting, just a job. The paychecks were consistent, and he could afford his apartment and the occasional nice dinner. But every day felt like he was simply going through the motions. Ethan was successful in many ways. He had climbed the corporate ladder, earned promotions, and was respected by his peers. But there was a hollow feeling inside him, a sense that something was missing. The small-town dreams he had once carried had been buried under a pile of spreadsheets and board meetings. And then, one cold November morning, everything changed. Ethan's company had been growing rapidly for years, but the tech industry was volatile. One week, the stock market crashed. The next, the company announced layoffs. Ethan's name was on the list. He had never expected it. He thought he was safe, comfortable. But suddenly, he found himself walking out of the office with a severance check in hand. No real plan, and no idea what he was supposed to do next. At first, the relief was overwhelming. No more endless emails, no more crushing deadlines, no more fake smiles at corporate mixers. But that relief quickly turned into fear. What now? His job was his identity. He had worked for years to build his career. Without it, who was he? The first few days after losing his job were filled with the mundane tasks of job hunting, sending out resumes, attending interviews that led nowhere, getting rejection emails, all while his savings account slowly dwindled. His apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. And the deeper he sank into this uncertainty, the more he realized how much he had neglected other aspects of his life, his health, his relationships, his passions. One night, after another fruitless job interview, Ethan took a walk to clear his head. He found himself at the local park, where the evening sun cast long shadows across the pavement. He sat on a bench, staring out at the small group of runners warming up. They were training for a marathon. Ethan had always hated running. In school, he was the last kid picked for the gym class teams, and running had always felt like a punishment. But as he watched these runners, something stirred within him. They weren't just running for fitness. They were running with purpose. They were pushing themselves to do something difficult, something beyond the ordinary. And suddenly, Ethan wondered, what if I could do that? What if I could challenge myself in a way I never had before? It wasn't about running a race for the sake of it. It was about proving to himself that he could still do hard things. It was about feeling like he had a purpose again. That night, as he sat in his apartment, something clicked. He couldn't change the past, but he could take control of the future. He couldn't sit around waiting for a new job or a new opportunity to fall into his lap. He had to create something new. And so, he signed up for the marathon. The first morning of training was rough. Ethan had barely run a mile in his life, and now he was supposed to run 26.2, but he set his alarm for 5 a.m. anyway. He laced up his old sneakers, worn, with a slight hole in the toe, and stepped out into the chilly morning air. He started slowly, barely managing to jog down the street before his legs felt like lead. The first day, he could barely make it half a mile. His lungs were on fire, and his legs screamed in protest. But as he walked home, panting and exhausted, he realized something. He had pushed himself, and that was more than he had done in months. He had taken the first step. The next day, he went out again, and the day after that. Each run was a little easier, but still a struggle. He felt weak, out of shape, and sometimes he wanted to quit, but he couldn't. His promise to himself was bigger than the discomfort. Every time he wanted to give up, he thought about what he had lost. His career, his self-belief, his passion for life. This was his chance to get it all back. As weeks went by, the physical changes were apparent. He lost weight, his muscles grew more defined, and his stamina improved. But the biggest change was in his mind. Running wasn't just about fitness anymore. It was about reclaiming something deeper. It was about learning to push past the pain, the doubt, and the fear. Every run, every step forward, made him realize that he was capable of more than he had ever believed. And more than that, he started to rediscover his purpose. He began to feel like himself again. He started writing down his thoughts in a journal after every run. He reflected on how much of his life had been dictated by outside expectations. He had spent years trying to fit into a mold, trying to live up to a version of success that had never truly been his. With running, he was finally living for himself, not for anyone else's approval. But just as things were starting to come together, life threw a curveball. One morning, while he was out on a training run, Ethan felt a sharp pain in his ankle. It wasn't much at first, just a slight twinge, but by the time he finished his run, it was swollen and throbbing. He iced it, but it didn't get better. It hurt to walk, let alone run. For the first time since starting his marathon training, Ethan considered quitting. The marathon was just weeks away, and now his body was betraying him. He couldn't afford to get injured. He had worked so hard, put so much effort into this goal. His friends and family had started to ask about the marathon, and he didn't want to let them down either. The doubt crept in, gnawing at him. Asterisk, what if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough? What if I fail? Asterisk. But as he sat on his couch, nursing his ankle, he realized something. Failure wasn't the worst thing that could happen. The worst thing would be to give up, to let the fear control him. So, he took it slow. He cut back on his training, focused on rest and recovery. He went to physical therapy, doing everything he could to get back on track. The fear of failure was still there, lurking in the background, but he refused to let it define him. The morning of the marathon arrived. Ethan stood at the starting line, surrounded by thousands of runners, each of them facing their own unique challenges. The sun was rising, casting a golden light over the city. The air was crisp, and there was a sense of excitement in the atmosphere. Ethan's heart raced, but it wasn't from fear. It was from anticipation. He was ready. The race started, and he fell into a rhythm. His ankle still ached a bit, but he pushed through it. The miles passed, and with each one, Ethan felt stronger. The doubt that had once haunted him began to fade. He was in the zone, focused, determined, and unstoppable. But there was a moment around mile 20 when the exhaustion hit him all at once. His muscles were sore, his energy was running low, and the finish line felt miles away. He wanted to quit. Just stop, he thought. Asterisk, no one will know. It's not worth it, asterisk. But then, a thought popped into his head. A reminder of why he had started this journey in the first place. Asterisk, this is about more than the race. This is about proving to myself that I can keep going, no matter what, asterisk. And so, he kept running. At mile 25, the crowd roared, and Ethan knew he was almost there. The last mile was a blur of pain and triumph, but as he crossed the finish line, tears welled up in his eyes. He had done it. He had run the marathon. More importantly, he had proven something to himself. Asterisk, I am enough. I am capable. I am resilient, asterisk. Ethan's marathon wasn't just a race. It was a metaphor for life. He had faced obstacles, doubts, and setbacks, but each one had shaped him into someone stronger. The marathon had given him more than a medal. It had given him his confidence back. As he stood at the finish line, holding his medal, he understood the true meaning of success. It wasn't about finishing first. It wasn't about the applause or the accolades. It was about never giving up, even when the road got tough. It was about believing that the hardest challenges were the ones that could transform you. And from that moment on, Ethan knew that no matter what came next, he was ready. Because resilience wasn't just something you learned, it was something you lived.